The scarred chrome of the orbital station gleamed under the harsh, unfiltered light of a distant star, a lonely sentinel marking the edge of human-explored space. Inside, the air hummed with the low thrum of life support and the distant clang of docking procedures. Jaxon Reid watched the approaching Alari vessel on the main concourse view screen, his reflection a ghost superimposed over the sleek, alien lines of the ship, his face, etched with lines that spoke more of hard decisions than age, remained impassive. The job was unusual, even by his standards. Protect an alien princess. He'd faced down insurgents, navigated treacherous political minefields on distant worlds, dismantled explosive devices under fire. But guarding royalty, especially alien royalty, whose species had a reputation for cold logic and an unnerving ability, felt like stepping onto unfamiliar, potentially unstable ground. He adjusted the collar of the formal, dark gray uniform provided by the diplomatic corps. It felt stiff, restrictive, unlike the worn fatigues he preferred. This assignment wasn't through his old channels, the shadowy networks of mercenary contacts and discarded military lifers. This came through official, sanitized routes, brokered by Earth government liaisons keen on making Princess Elyra's visit a success. The Alari held keys to certain faster-than-light technologies Earth desperately needed, and this mission was draped in the fragile silks of interstellar diplomacy. Jackson's role was simple on paper: protect the principal. The reality, he knew, was always more complex. Threats rarely announced themselves politely. The Alari ship docked with a whisper of hydraulics, a stark contrast to the grittier sounds of human engineering. The airlock hissed open, and the delegation emerged. They moved with a quiet, gliding grace that seemed at odds with the station's utilitarian design. Tall, slender figures clad in robes of shifting silver and deep blue. Their features were fine, almost sculpted, with large, dark eyes that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. They communicated amongst themselves in soft, melodic tones that the universal translator struggled to imbue with discernible emotion. And then she appeared. Princess Elyra. She was younger than he'd expected, though judging alien age was a fool's errand. Her eyes, wide and intelligent, scanned the reception area with unnerving focus. They held a depth that seemed ancient, despite the youthful cast of her features. Her silver robes shimmered, catching the station lights like captured starlight. She carried herself with an innate dignity, a quiet command that needed no overt display. Jaxon felt a flicker of something unexpected, not attraction, but professional respect tinged with curiosity. He stepped forward as the chief liaison, a portly man named Abernathy, sweating slightly in the recycled air, began the formal introductions. Your Highness, may I present Jaxon Reid? He will be heading your personal security detail during your time on Earth, Abernathy announced, his voice a touch too loud. Elyra inclined her head slightly, her gaze meeting Jackson's. Her eyes were like polished obsidian, seeming to see more than just the surface. Mr. Reid, your reputation precedes you. Though the files are heavily redacted, her voice, filtered through the translator, was cool, precise, yet held an underlying resonance. Security relies on discretion, Your Highness, not publicity, Jaxon replied evenly, keeping his stance relaxed but alert. He noted the way her guards, two imposing Alari in darker, more functional attire, subtly shifted position, their eyes constantly scanning. Trained professionals, like him, just alien, the core tenet of Alari society, the one drilled into him during the hasty briefings, was their unique biological trait. Physical contact allowed them to absorb memories, emotions, experiences directly from another sentient being. It was an intimate, profound exchange, and because of its intensity and potential for misuse, their culture had evolved strict, almost sacred prohibitions against casual touch. It was considered a violation, a deeply personal intrusion reserved for the most solemn or medically necessary circumstances, governed by intricate protocols. For Elyra, a member of the royal lineage, the rules were likely even more stringent. No handshakes, no comforting pats on the shoulder, no physical assistance unless absolutely critical. Maintain distance, protect, but do not touch. It was a parameter he understood, a tactical boundary. The journey to Earth was uneventful, conducted aboard a secure diplomatic shuttle. Jaxon maintained a perimeter, coordinating with the Alari, guards, Corvin and Lyra, through coded comms. They were efficient, silent, their movements economical. Elyra spent most of the trip in quiet contemplation or in consultation with her advisors via secure holographic links. Jaxon watched her sometimes, observing her stillness, the way her dark eyes seemed to track patterns in the star fields beyond the viewport. He wondered what she saw, what thoughts moved behind that serene facade. His own past was a turbulent sea of noise, gunfire, shouted commands, the faces of comrades lost, the weight of choices made in impossible situations, a universe away from the calm she projected. Earth Ba was a carefully orchestrated affair. News crews kept at a distance, political dignitaries offering practiced smiles, security layers thick and visible. The planet felt loud, chaotic, vibrant after the sterile quiet of space travel. Jaxon felt a familiar tension settle in his shoulders. Crowds were unpredictable variables. He scanned faces, body language, looking for the anomaly, the flicker of intent that signaled danger. Elyra, flanked by her guards and advisors, moved through the welcoming ceremony with practiced grace, her translated responses polite, measured, revealing nothing of her personal impressions. They were installed in a secure wing of a government complex, retrofitted for the Alari delegation. The air was filtered differently, the lighting adjusted to mimic their homeworld spectrum. Jaxon oversaw the security sweeps, the placement of sensors, the patrol routes. He worked alongside Corvin and Lyra, a grudging respect forming between them, forged in shared vigilance. They communicated in clipped, professional terms, their different species secondary to the task at hand. Elyra maintained her distance, adhering to protocol. Jaxon would brief her daily, standing several feet away, delivering concise reports on security status, potential risks, schedule changes. She would listen intently, ask pertinent questions, her obsidian eyes tracking his face. He found himself consciously meeting that gaze, refusing to be intimidated or unnerved by the intensity he sensed beneath the surface. He wondered if she could somehow glean information, even without touch, if her species' sensitivity extended beyond the physical. The briefing had mentioned latent empathic abilities, but dismissed them as minor, unreliable. Still, he kept his thoughts guarded, his professional mask firmly in place. The diplomatic talks began, meetings filled with carefully worded proposals, discussions of trade routes, resource sharing, and the delicate balance of power in their galactic neighborhood. Jaxon wasn't privy to the details. His focus remained external, on the protective shell around the princess. He spent hours monitoring feeds, walking perimeters, analyzing intelligence reports. Whispers of anti-alien sentiment on Earth had grown louder in recent years, fueled by fringe groups and amplified by certain media outlets. Humans, Elyra's advisors had likely warned her, were volatile, emotional, prone to irrationality. Jaxon couldn't entirely disagree, but he also knew the capacity for courage, sacrifice, and deep empathy that resided within his species. His own memories were a testament to that duality. One evening, after a long day of negotiations, Jaxon was reviewing security logs in the command center, adjacent to Elyra's suite. Corvin and Lyra were stationed outside her door. A subtle anomaly flickered on one of the hallway sensors. A momentary energy spike inconsistent with normal activity. Too small for an alarm, but enough to prickle Jackson's instincts. He zoomed in on the feed, rewinding fractionally. Nothing visible. Static. A malfunction. Or something else. He flagged it for analysis. A cold knot tightening slightly in his gut. Complacency was a killer in his line of work. He decided to do a physical sweep of the outer corridor himself. He signaled his movement to Corvin via their secure comm link, doing a walk around. Sector Gamma. Sensor registered a ghost. Acknowledged. Corvin's translated voice replied, "Professional." The corridor was quiet, the adjusted lighting casting long shadows. Jaxon moved silently, his senses hyper-alert. He checked access panels, ventilation shafts, service junctions. Everything appeared secure. He rounded a corner, heading towards a less trafficked service area. That's when he saw it, a faint shimmer in the air near a maintenance conduit. Like heat haze, cloaking tech, minimalist, designed to fool passive sensors, but not a vigilant eye. He drew his sidearm, a sleek kinetic pulse pistol, the safety clicking off silently. He slowed his breathing, melted into the shadows. Years of training took over. He advanced cautiously. Two figures materialized abruptly from the shimmer, clad in dark, non-reflective suits, their faces obscured by visored helmets. They moved with lethal efficiency, raising weapons that looked disturbingly non-standard. Not Earth tech, not Alari, something else. Compromise. Jaxon barked into his comm, simultaneously opening fire. His pulse rounds impacted the lead figure's chest, sending them staggering back. But their suits seemed to absorb some of the energy. The second assailant reacted instantly, firing their weapon. Not a projectile, not energy, but a thin, almost invisible filament that lashed through the air towards him. Jaxon dodged, the filament slicing through the air where his head had been, embedding itself in the bulkhead behind him with a faint sizzle. He fired again, aiming for the joints, the weaker points. The first attacker went down, suit failing. The second pressed the attack, firing another filament. Jaxon sidestepped, but not quite fast enough. The filament grazed his forearm, searing through the uniform fabric and biting into his flesh. An agonizing pain, white-hot and immediate, flooded his senses. But it wasn't just pain. It was wrong. A coldness spread rapidly from the wound, a dizzying disorientation fogging his thoughts. His vision swam. Toxin. Specialized. He gritted his teeth, fighting the encroaching darkness. Raising his pistol again, he saw Corvin and Lyra sprinting down the corridor, their own weapons drawn. The remaining attacker, seeing reinforcements, fired one last wild shot towards the approaching guards before turning to flee, activating their cloaking device and vanishing near the service conduit. Corvin pursued, while Lyra rushed towards Jaxon. Jaxon stumbled, leaning against the wall, the world tilting precariously. The pain in his arm was overshadowed by the rapid systemic failure gripping him. His heart hammered erratically, his breath catching in his throat. Black spots danced in his vision. Toxin. Weaponized filament. He managed to gasp, clutching his arm. Lyra knelt beside him, her usually impassive features tight with concern. She produced a medical scanner, running it over the wound. The device emitted a series of urgent, high-pitched beeps. Neuroagent detected. Rapid cellular degradation. Critical. Her voice was clipped. Urgent. She administered a broad-spectrum counteragent from her kit. but it seemed to have little effect. Agent is unknown. Resisting standard neutralization, Jaxon felt his consciousness slipping, the coldness reaching his core. He could hear shouting, alarms blaring now throughout the complex. Then, another presence, Elyra. She had emerged from her suite, drawn by the commotion, her silver robes a stark contrast to the emergency lights now flashing red. She saw him, saw Lyra struggling, saw the grave readings on the scanner. "Report," Elyra commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Assassin neutralized. One escaped. Reid is critically wounded. Toxin unidentified. Resisting countermeasures. Vital signs collapsing." Lyra reported rapidly. Elyra moved closer, her dark eyes fixed on Jaxon's face. Now pale and beaded with sweat, he could feel his life slipping away, the darkness pulling him under. He thought a firefight survived, odds beaten, only to fall to some exotic poison in a sterile corridor. A grim irony. He saw the conflict in Elyra's eyes, the deep-seated cultural taboo warring with the immediate, life or death reality before her. To touch him was forbidden, a violation of her people's most sacred laws, especially for one of her standing. To not touch him meant watching him die. He saw her gaze flick to the wound, then back to his fading eyes. The Alari ability wasn't just about passive memory reading. Advanced practitioners could sometimes influence biological processes, purge toxins, mend tissues, though it required immense focus and direct contact. It was a technique rarely used, fraught with peril for both parties. "Standard medical intervention is failing," Lyra stated, her voice grim. "Without direct bio-interface to identify and counteract the agent at the cellular level." The implication hung heavy in the air. Time seemed to stretch, measured in the erratic pounding of Jaxon's failing heart. He saw Elyra take a deep breath, a decision crystallizing in her obsidian eyes. She knelt beside him, opposite Lyra, her slender hand, pale and fine-boned, hovered over the uninjured skin of his other arm. Near his wrist, he felt a tremor pass through her, or perhaps it was his own body shuddering. "Forgive this intrusion," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, seemingly directed as much to her ancestors or her conscience as to him. Then, her fingers made contact with his skin. It was like being struck by lightning and plunged into an icy abyss simultaneously, a blinding torrent, not of pain, but of sensation, flooded his mind. But it wasn't his own, it was hers, a cool, ancient consciousness, vast and intricate, patterns of logic like crystalline structures, echoes of millennia of history, the weight of royal lineage, the profound, ingrained aversion to this very act. It brushed against his own chaotic thoughts like silk against sandpaper, and then the flood reversed. As her consciousness sought to analyze the toxin, to interface with his biology, the conduit opened both ways. His life, his memories, his raw, unfiltered experiences slammed into her with the force of a physical blow. He felt her recoil mentally, overwhelmed. But her physical contact remained firm, her fingers pressing slightly harder as she focused on the task, on fighting the poison spreading through his veins. He couldn't control the flow. Images, sounds, emotions surged from him into her. The grit and terror of urban warfare on Tauseti IV, the bone-deep chill of a stealth insertion on a frozen moon, the gut-wrenching choice to sacrifice a captured informant to save his squad, the face of Sergeant Eva Rostova, laughing one moment, gone the next in a plasma blast. The quiet satisfaction of bringing a lost child back to her parents during a ceasefire. The suffocating guilt over missions that went sideways. Objectives achieved at terrible cost. The loneliness of the warrior, The burden of command, the flicker of hope he rarely allowed himself to feel. It wasn't just data. It was the raw, visceral feeling of it all. Fear, rage, love, duty, regret, empathy, everything he was, poured into her unprepared mind. He felt her consciousness stagger under the onslaught. This raw, messy, contradictory flood was utterly alien to the ordered, logical framework of Alari experience, especially one as sheltered and controlled as a princess's. He sensed her shock, her confusion, her struggle to maintain focus on neutralizing the toxin while being bombarded by the chaotic storm of his past. Yet, she didn't break contact. He felt her will, steel beneath the silk, pushing back against the invasive memories, analyzing the complex molecular structure of the neuroagent, formulating a counter-sequence within his own cells. A warmth began to spread from the point of contact, slowly pushing back the icy coldness. The erratic hammering in his chest began to stabilize. His breathing eased. The darkness receded from the edges of his vision. He could feel the toxin being broken down, neutralized, rendered inert by her direct intervention. The process was intricate, precise, a testament to the power her species wielded and feared. When the immediate danger passed, her vital signs stable enough for conventional treatment, her hand withdrew as if burned. He saw her physically flinch, her eyes wide with something akin to horror, or perhaps profound shock. She swayed, caught by Lyra before she could fall. Her face was pale, her breath coming in short gasps. The serene mask was shattered, replaced by raw vulnerability. She looked at Jaxon, truly looked at him, not as a security asset, but as the source of the overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful, brutal flood of experiences she had just involuntarily absorbed. Jaxon, weak but conscious, met her gaze. He felt strangely exposed, raw, as if his soul had been laid bare. He also felt a strange connection, an unwanted intimacy forged in the crucible of crisis. He had survived, thanks to her breaking her people's most sacred rule. But the cost of that survival, the accidental, forceful merging of their minds, hung between them, a silent, explosive secret. The air crackled with unspoken implications. The mission, the diplomacy, everything had just become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. In the sterile quiet of the medical bay, Jaxon recovered rapidly. The Alari counteragent, once initiated by Elyra's touch, had been remarkably effective. Physical wounds healed, but the echo of the shared consciousness lingered, a phantom limb connecting him to the alien princess. He replayed the moment of contact, the overwhelming sense of her ancient, ordered mind brushing against his own chaotic one, and then the sickening rush as his life flooded into hers. He felt a profound sense of violation, not directed at her, but at the circumstances that had forced such an intrusion. He had guarded his past carefully, compartmentalized the trauma, the regrets. Now, they were known, intimately, by an alien he was assigned to protect. Elyra avoided him for several days. Reports came through Lyra or Corvin. Jaxon understood. What she had experienced must have been profoundly disturbing, challenging everything she thought she knew about humans, perhaps even about herself. The official report on the incident was carefully sanitized. An unknown assailant, likely targeting the diplomatic mission. Jaxon wounded defending the princess. Alari medical technology proving highly effective. No mention of the touch, the memory transfer. That remained their shared, unspoken burden. When they finally met again, it was in the relative privacy of the secure garden atrium attached to her wing. Jaxon stood, waiting. She entered alone, dismissing her guards with a quiet word. She still wore the silver robes, but the air of serene detachment was gone, replaced by a visible tension, a new awareness in her dark eyes. She stopped several feet away, the mandated distance feeling both customary and now deeply ironic. "Mr. Reid," she began, her voice softer than before, less formal. "Your recovery is satisfactory." "Yes, Your Highness." "Thanks to your intervention," he replied, keeping his tone neutral, professional. He wouldn't push, wouldn't acknowledge the transfer unless she did. She looked away, towards the holographic waterfall shimmering in the corner. "What I experienced during the intervention, it was," she struggled for words, "a rare sight, unexpected, intense. The circumstances were extreme," Jaxon offered, a deliberate understatement. Elyra turned back to him, her gaze direct, searching. "Your memories, they were chaotic, violent, filled with pain." He saw not judgment, but a dawning, troubled understanding in her eyes. "Your species is often characterized as volatile, driven by base emotions. That is what our reports suggested. What I was taught. We are complex, Your Highness, capable of great cruelty and great sacrifice," Jaxon said quietly. "I felt the sacrifice," she whispered, almost to herself. "The choices made when there were no good options. The cost." She looked at him again, a profound shift in her expression. "I felt empathy, your empathy, for your comrades, even for your enemies, sometimes. It contradicts our understanding of human nature." Jaxon remained silent, letting her process. This was the crux of it. Her people viewed memory absorption as potentially corrupting, fearing the volatile emotions of other species, especially humans. They prized logic, order, emotional detachment. What she had felt from him was the messy, contradictory reality of human conscience, something their doctrines hadn't prepared her for. "The attack," she said, her voice regaining some of its command. "It was targeted, precise. The weapon, the toxin, sophisticated, not the work of fringe radicals." "Agreed," Jaxon said. "The cloaking tech, the weapon filament, the specific neuroagent. This was professional, well-funded. Someone does not want this alliance to succeed," Elyra stated. "Someone with considerable resources and a willingness to employ lethal, deniable assets." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "And they knew our security protocols. They anticipated your response. Or they knew Alari physiology," Jaxon countered. "Knew a specialized toxin might require unconventional countermeasures." He watched her face closely. Had the attack been designed not just to kill her, but potentially to expose or compromise her in some way? Or perhaps to force exactly the kind of intervention that had occurred? A flicker of suspicion, cold and sharp, entered Elyra's eyes. "You suggest the attack might have originated from within. It's a possibility we can't ignore," Jaxon said. "Loyalties can be complex, agendas hidden, even among your own delegation, or those back on your home world." Elyra considered this, her logical mind processing the implications. The idea of betrayal from within her own people was clearly disturbing, yet the evidence pointed towards inside knowledge. "My uncle, Regent Malrix. He oversees internal security and intelligence. He was reserved about this mission. He believes humans are too unpredictable, that closer ties represent a contamination risk to our culture." Jaxon filed the name away. "Regent Malrix, powerful, security focused, harbored anti-human sentiment, a potential suspect. Does he have the resources for such an operation? He commands significant influence, access to restricted technologies, covert operatives." Elyra paused, troubled. "But to attempt assassination, to risk interplanetary war, it seems extreme." Desperate people, or those hungry for power, resort to extreme measures, Jaxon said. The words echoing lessons learned the hard way. We need to investigate. Quietly. We can't trust the official channels. Not until we know who was behind the attack. Elyra nodded slowly, a new resolve hardening her features. The sheltered princess was receding, replaced by a leader facing a crisis. The accidental memory transfer, traumatic as it was, had given her a glimpse into a world of gray areas, betrayal, and the necessity of hard choices. Jaxon's world. It had inadvertently prepared her. Agreed, Mr. Reid. We will proceed with discretion. Your expertise in navigating such complexities will be invaluable. A fragile, tentative alliance formed between them, born of shared danger and a secret intimacy. They began their own covert investigation, using Jaxon's network of contacts, discreet hackers, information brokers lurking in the digital shadows, and Elyra's access to restricted Alari databases, carefully bypassed through back channels she hadn't known existed until necessity forced her hand. Lyra and Corvin, fiercely loyal to Elyra and deeply disturbed by the attack, became their trusted inner circle, their professional duties now encompassing clandestine operations against an unknown internal enemy. Jaxon taught Elyra about covert communication, dead drops, counter-surveillance techniques. She, in turn, guided him through the labyrinthine complexities of Alari political factions, encrypted data protocols, and cultural nuances that could hide threats. He saw her sharp intellect adapt quickly, her logical mind proving adept at analyzing patterns, identifying inconsistencies that human intuition might miss. She saw his methodical planning, his ability to anticipate threats, his calm under pressure that stemmed not from detachment, but from confronting fear and moving through it. The memory flashes continued for Elyra, less overwhelming now, more like echoes. A snatch of battlefield adrenaline, the taste of stale rations, the quiet grief beside a makeshift grave. They colored her perception, made her question the black and white pronouncements of Alari elders. She started seeing the humans around her differently, not just as chaotic bundles of emotion, but as beings capable of profound depth, resilience, and yes, dangerous volatility, but also incredible kindness. Jaxon's memories acted as a Rosetta Stone, translating the human condition in a way no diplomatic briefing ever could. Their investigation began yielding results. Tracing the filament weapon's energy signature led them down a rabbit hole of shell corporations and falsified shipping manifests. It pointed towards off-world manufacturing, technology not readily available on Earth or through legitimate Alari channels. Financial forensics, handled by one of Jaxon's most trusted hacker contacts, uncovered shadowy transactions, funneling vast sums from Alari state accounts, masked as infrastructure projects, into untraceable dark web coffers, the source of the funding. Accounts directly controlled by Regent Malrix's Office of Internal Security. The motive still seemed disproportionate, disrupting a treaty, assassinating a princess. It felt like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. There had to be something more, something Malrix was desperate to protect or gain. Elyra, using her royal access codes, combined with bypasses suggested by Jaxon's contact, delved deeper into Malrix's restricted files, searching for anomalies, hidden projects. She found it late one cycle, hidden within logistical reports for resource management on several remote Alari outpost worlds supposedly dedicated to atmospheric processing or mineral surveys. The reports detailed massive energy consumption, complex life support systems far exceeding stated needs, and regular shipments of classified biological stasis equipment. Cross-referencing shipment origins led back to black market suppliers, specializing in illegal human trafficking. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Elyra felt a wave of nausea, the logical framework of her mind rebelling against the monstrous implication. She contacted Jaxon immediately via their secure, encrypted channel. Jaxon. Her voice was tight, strained. I think I know why Malrix tried to kill me, and why he fears closer ties with Earth. What did you find? Jaxon asked, instantly alert. Energy signatures, life support logs, shipments. It's not about the treaty, not directly. It's about what closer scrutiny from humans might uncover. She paused, taking a shaky breath. My uncle. I believe he is running clandestine facilities. Farms. Farms. Jaxon echoed, confused. Memory farms. Elyra clarified, her voice trembling with barely suppressed outrage. Facilities where humans are kept captive, and their memories, their experiences, are forcibly extracted, harvested. Jaxon felt a cold dread seep into him, colder than the toxin had been. He'd seen the depths of cruelty sentient beings were capable of, but this was a new, grotesque violation. For what purpose? Consumption, Elyra said, the word tasting like poison. Raw, intense human experiences, combat, passion, discovery. Fear, packaged and sold as addictive luxuries to a select elite among the Alari. An illegal, hidden trade built on the stolen lives and minds of countless humans. He's been funding it, hiding it for years, likely using the anti-human sentiment he cultivates as cover. The full horror of the situation crashed down on them. Malrix wasn't just trying to prevent an alliance. He was protecting a vast criminal empire built on the systematic mental enslavement and exploitation of an entire species. Elyra's diplomatic mission. Her potential success in fostering trust and understanding represented an existential threat to his operation. If humans and Alari grew closer, if transparency increased, his monstrous secret would inevitably be exposed. He needed Elyra dead. The mission failed, and the narrative of dangerous, untrustworthy humans reinforced. The accidental transfer. Jaxon realized aloud, my memories. They gave you a baseline, a comparison. You felt genuine human experience, not the curated, weaponized narratives Malrix likely promotes. Yes, Elyra confirmed, her voice low. Your pain. Your empathy. It showed me the lie he has built his power upon. She straightened, the trembling replaced by cold fury. This obscenity cannot stand. We have to expose him. We have to shut it down. Going rogue wasn't just an option anymore. It was the only path. They were no longer just investigating an assassination attempt. They were preparing to dismantle a hidden empire of suffering, orchestrated by one of the most powerful figures in the Alari government. Their fragile alliance, forged in secrets and shared danger, was about to be tested in ways neither could have imagined. They had the horrifying truth. Now, they had to find a way to make the galaxy listen, before Malrix could silence them permanently. The weight of their discovery pressed down on Jaxon and Elyra, a suffocating burden of knowledge. Regent Malrix wasn't just corrupt, he was a monster trafficking in stolen souls. The memory farms represented a fundamental violation, not just of human rights, but of the Alari principle of respecting sentient consciousness, twisted into a perverse form of consumption. Elyra felt a deep, burning shame for her species, or at least, for the elite faction Malrix represented. Jaxon felt a familiar, cold rage, the kind that settled deep in his bones when confronted with profound injustice, especially against the vulnerable. We need proof, Jaxon stated, his voice low and steady. cutting through the initial shock. Irrefutable proof. Logs. Financial records are good, but we need visuals. Testimonies. Something undeniable that will cut through Malrix's defenses and political maneuvering. The main processing center, Elyra murmured, accessing the fragmented data she'd pulled. The energy signatures suggest the largest facility is located on Xylos Prime, disguised as a geological research outpost in the northern volcanic fields. Remote, heavily shielded. Getting data out of a place like that remotely will be almost impossible if his security is as tight as we suspect. Jaxon assessed. Firewalls, signal jammers, potentially AI counter-intrusion systems. We'd need physical access, or someone on the inside. Impossible, Elyra stated flatly. The staff there must be deeply complicit or heavily indoctrinated, and any direct assault would be suicide without significant support, Jaxon finished. Support we don't have. We're operating outside official channels. They needed a different strategy. Not a direct attack. Not yet. They needed leverage. They needed to expose Malrix in a way he couldn't easily suppress. The broadcast, Jaxon said, leaning forward. We leak what we have. The financial trails, the shipping logs, the energy signatures. We package it with an accusation. We force him onto the defensive. He'll deny everything. Elyra countered. He controls internal media, influences interstellar news feeds through proxies. He'll dismiss it as human propaganda, fabrication by dissidents. Yes, he will, Jaxon agreed. But it will sow doubt. It will make people look closer, and it will flush him out. He'll have to react, tighten security, maybe move assets. Mistakes are made under pressure. He paused, considering the next, riskier step. And we don't just broadcast to news outlets. We leak it directly to sympathetic factions within the Alari government, those who might oppose Malrix but lack the proof or the courage to act. And we leak it to human governments, officially and unofficially. Elyra looked hesitant, sharing classified Alari intelligence, accusing a regent. It's treason. His operation is a crime against both our species, Jaxon stated firmly. Exposing it is not treason. It's justice, and it might be the only way to gain the allies we need. He met her gaze. Are you prepared for the consequences? She thought of the echoes of Jackson's memories, the weight of command decisions, the acceptance of necessary risk. She thought of the faceless victims in Malrix's farms, their lives reduced to consumable experiences. Her resolve hardened. Yes, the truth must come out, regardless of the personal cost. They began meticulous preparations. Jaxon reached out to his most trusted, off-grid hacker, a shadowy figure known only as Nyx, renowned for untraceable data dissemination. Elyra carefully compiled the evidence, encrypting it layer by layer, adding her own authenticated analysis. A damning indictment from within the Alari royal structure. Corvin and Lyra established secure communication nodes, prepared escape routes, and gathered whatever untraceable supplies they could requisition or acquire discreetly. The atmosphere in their small, isolated group grew thick with tension. They were playing a high-stakes game against a ruthless opponent with vast resources. Discovery meant detention at best, elimination at worst. Jaxon found himself watching Elyra, marveling at her transformation. The initial shock had given way to a fierce determination. The empathy she'd inadvertently absorbed from him seemed to fuel her, giving her a connection to the human victims, a drive that transcended political calculation. Their professional relationship deepened, evolving in the crucible of shared risk, late at night, reviewing data or planning contingencies. They would talk. She asked him more about his past, not with morbid curiosity, but with a genuine desire to understand the context of the memories she carried. He found himself opening up in ways he never had before, sharing stories not just of combat, but of the quiet moments between, the ethical dilemmas, the faces he couldn't forget. She, in turn, spoke of her upbringing, the stifling protocols, the loneliness of command, her hopes for a future where Alari interaction with other species was based on respect, not fear or exploitation. The memory transfer, initially a violation, had become a strange bridge between their vastly different worlds. The night of the broadcast was taut with controlled anxiety. NYX confirmed readiness. Elyra gave the final authorization code. Data packets, heavily encrypted and routed through a dizzying array of proxies across the galaxy, began to flow. They targeted major news networks on Earth and neutral systems. Key Alari government communicators flagged as potential reformists, and specific human intelligence agencies Jaxon knew could act decisively if presented with credible evidence of crimes against their citizens. They watched the immediate aftermath on encrypted feeds. Initial confusion, then cautious reports, treating it as an unverified leak. But the data was compelling. Financial analysts started corroborating the fund transfers. Experts recognized the patterns of human trafficking networks. Whispers turned into headlines. On the Alari home world, carefully controlled news feeds initially suppressed the story, but leaks within the government, sparked by Elyra's targeted messages, began to circulate on secure back channels. Regent Malrix responded exactly as Jaxon predicted. Vehement denials, accusations of a sophisticated human smear campaign designed to destabilize the Alari government and seize technological secrets. He locked down communications, increased surveillance, and publicly denounced the entrators within his own administration, spreading malicious lies. His reaction was too strong, too defensive. It fueled suspicion rather than quelling it. More importantly, the broadcast galvanized action. Human governments, outraged by the evidence of systematic abduction and exploitation, issued strongly worded diplomatic protests, demanding investigation and accountability. Unofficially, special operations units were put on high alert. Within the Alari government, moderate factions, previously intimidated by Malrix, saw an opportunity. Secret messages of support began trickling back to Elyra through secure channels established by Corvin. They didn't have an army yet, but they had allies, people willing to help, to provide intelligence, to look the other way. One crucial piece of intelligence came from an unexpected source, an Alari scientist who had worked peripherally on the Xylos Prime project years ago, developing sensory interface technology. Horrified by the broadcast and realizing the true application of his work, he contacted Elyra anonymously, providing detailed schematics of the main processing center, including security protocols, structural weaknesses, and, critically, the location of the central memory core where the harvested experiences were stored and cataloged. He also confirmed the existence of stasis pods holding hundreds, possibly thousands, of human captives. "This is it," Jaxon said, studying the schematics overlaid on a holographic map. "This gives us a viable infiltration route, a maintenance tunnel network, shielded from internal sensors, leading close to the central core chamber and the primary stasis bay. Infiltration is still incredibly risky," Elyra cautioned. "The facility defenses will be on high alert after the leak, which is why we don't just infiltrate," Jaxon countered. "A plan forming. We attack. A coordinated assault." "With what forces?" Elyra asked, skeptical. "The broadcast gave us allies, remember. Jaxon tapped the map. Human special forces are likely staging nearby, waiting for a political green light that might never come. If we give them actionable intelligence, a clear target, and confirmation of live human captives, some units might interpret their orders creatively, especially if we create a diversion. He looked at Elyra, and we have Alari sympathizers now, some within Malrix's own security forces on Xylos, according to the scientist. If we can coordinate with them, it was audacious, a joint, unsanctioned strike force of disillusioned Alari and potentially rogue human operatives, attacking one of the most secure, secret facilities controlled by the Alari Regent. Failure meant capture, death, and potentially igniting an interstellar war. Success meant liberating thousands of captives and shattering Malrix's empire of cruelty. Elyra met Jaxon's gaze, the weight of the decision settling upon her. The princess who had arrived on Earth, bound by protocol, was gone. In her place stood a leader forged in crisis, guided by an empathy accidentally thrust upon her, and now faced with a choice that would define her legacy. She thought of the stolen memories, the stolen lives. She thought of Jaxon's scars, visible and invisible, earned in the fight against darkness. "We fight," Elyra said, her voice clear and strong. "We liberate those captives, and we bring my uncle to justice. Coordinate with your contacts. Jaxon, reach out to the sympathetic Alari elements on Xylos. Let's plan the assault." The die was cast. They were no longer just exposing a crime. They were launching a rebellion. Together, the human soldier haunted by his past and the alien princess changed by it, prepared to lead a desperate charge into the heart of the darkness. The planning phase was intense, compressed. Time was their enemy. Malrix, cornered and exposed, would be accelerating his contingencies, perhaps even purging evidence, including the captives. Secure. Encrypted communications flew back and forth between Jaxon's hidden location with Elyra, Nyx's untraceable servers, sympathetic Alari contacts on Xylos Prime, and clandestine human military liaisons operating in the gray zones of plausible deniability. Jaxon felt a grim familiarity settle over him. This was his element, planning high-risk operations against overwhelming odds. But this time felt different. It wasn't just a mission, it was personal. Elyra's presence, her quiet determination, her intelligent contributions to strategy, grounded him. The memory transfer had created a strange bond, allowing them to anticipate each other's thoughts, communicate complex ideas with minimal words. He saw the logic. She felt the tactical necessities. Elyra, meanwhile, navigated the treacherous currents of Alari politics from afar. Using secure back channels, she rallied support among reformist factions, providing them with continuous updates and evidence, urging them to prepare for a power shift should Malrix fall. She also sent coded messages to loyalist elements within the Xylos Prime facility garrison, appealing to their honor, revealing the true nature of Malrix's operation. It was a gamble. Some might betray her, but they needed inside help. The plan solidified. A two-pronged approach. Phase 1. NYX would initiate a massive cyber attack targeting Xylos Prime's external communications and secondary power grids, creating chaos and confusion. Phase 2. Under cover of the cyber attack, a small joint strike team, Jaxon, Elyra Corvin, Lyra. A handful of elite human special operators who had volunteered for an unsanctioned reconnaissance mission, and coordinating with sympathetic Alari guards inside, would infiltrate the facility via the maintenance tunnels. Their primary objectives: reach the central control room to initiate a facility-wide lockdown bypass and unlock the stasis pods, access the main memory core to secure the data evidence, and locate, and neutralize Regent Malrix, who intelligence suggested was personally overseeing operations from the facility. The human contingent arrived via stealth insertion, their small, black spacecraft defying detection systems. They were ghosts, professionals led by a pragmatic major named Thorn, whose grim expression suggested he understood the stakes and the unofficial nature of their presence. Introductions were brief, efficient. Trust was built on shared risk, not conversation. Elyra insisted on being part of the infiltration team. "I know the Alari protocols," she argued when Jaxon initially objected. "I understand the technology, and I must confront my uncle myself. This is my responsibility." Her resolve was absolute. Jaxon, seeing the steel in her eyes, relented, ensuring she had modified protective gear and assigning Lyra as her close protection. The night of the assault arrived, thick with the tension of imminent violence. Xylos Prime hung in the view screen, a volcanic world shrouded in toxic clouds. NYX initiated the cyber attack. Alarms blared across the facility, visible even from orbit as emergency lights flickered on. Communications went down. Power fluctuated erratically in non-essential sectors. The diversion was working. Their stealth lander touched down silently in a desolate lava field miles from the main complex, shielded by geological interference. The team disembarked into the harsh, sulfur-tinged air, moving quickly towards the hidden entrance to the maintenance tunnels indicated by the schematics. Jaxon led the way, his senses on high alert, Elyra close behind him, flanked by Corvin and Lyra, with Thorn's operators forming the rear guard. The tunnels were cramped, dusty, echoing with the low thrum of the facility's machinery. Emergency lighting cast long, dancing shadows. They moved swiftly, silently, guided by Jaxon's tactical display and the live updates from the Alari sympathizers inside, who were disabling internal sensors and diverting patrols ahead of them. They reached the junction leading towards the central core complex. An internal security team, loyal to Malrix, lay in ambush. Their sympathizer contact had warned them too late. Pulse rifle fire erupted in the confined space. Jaxon and Thorn's operators reacted instantly, laying down suppressing fire. Using the tunnel supports as cover, Corvin and Lyra shielded Elyra, returning fire with deadly Alari precision weapons. It was brutal, close-quarters combat. One of Thorn's men went down, hit in the leg. Jaxon took out 2 guards with controlled bursts, the kinetic rounds punching through their armor. Corvin disabled another with a nerve disruptor. The firefight was over in seconds. The attackers neutralized. The cost, however, was noted in Thorn's grim expression as his medic tended to the wounded soldier. They pressed on, the encounter adding urgency to their movements. They reached the sublevel beneath the main control room. Their Alari contact inside, a captain named Rorik, who Elyra had personally swayed, met them. "Malrix is in the central control room," Rorik reported quickly. "He's initiated a data purge of the memory core and is preparing to overload the stasis bay reactors if the facility is breached. He intends to leave no witnesses, no evidence." "He won't succeed," Elyra stated, her voice cold. They split into 2 teams. Thorn's operators and Corvin would proceed to the stasis bay control, overpower the guards loyal to Malrix, and halt the overload sequence. Jaxon, Elyra, Lyra, and Captain Rorik would assault the main control room, secure the memory core data, and confront Malrix. The approach to the control room was heavily guarded. Rorik used his command codes to bypass initial checkpoints, but deeper inside, security was manual, loyalists handpicked by Malrix. Another firefight erupted in a wider corridor. Jaxon and Lyra provided covering fire, while Rorik and Elyra bypassed a security lockout on a blast door. Pulse rounds and disruptor beams crisscrossed the hallway. Jaxon felt a searing heat as a glancing shot scored his shoulder armor, staggering him momentarily. Lyra moved with fluid grace, her twin pistols taking down targets with chilling efficiency. The blast door hissed open. They poured through, sealing it behind them, leaving the remaining guards trapped outside. They were in. The control room was a large circular chamber dominated by holographic displays showing facility status, rapidly deleting data logs, and external sensor feeds. In the center, standing before the main console, was Regent Malrix. He turned, his face a mask of cold fury. He was older than Elyra, his features sharper, colder, his eyes holding a fanatic gleam. He wore the dark uniform of Alari Internal Security, and at his side stood two elite Red Guard commandos, his personal protectors. Elyra, Malrix spat, his voice dripping contempt. Leading humans and traitors into the heart of our most vital research. You disgrace our bloodline. You disgrace our people. Uncle, Elyra countered, stepping forward, her voice ringing with authority despite the surrounding tension. Trafficking in stolen lives. Building power on the suffering of others. This ends now. This facility ensures Alari's supremacy, Malrix retorted, his eyes blazing. Humans are chaotic, emotional cattle. Their experiences properly refine strengthen us, elevate us. You blinded by sentimentality would throw away our advantage. Allow their weakness to infect us. There is no strength in cruelty, Elyra said, her gaze unwavering. Only corruption. You are ordering the purge of the memory core, the destruction of the stasis bays. You would murder thousands to cover your crimes, a necessary sacrifice to protect our future. Malrix gestured to his guards. Detain them. The princess will be re-educated. The Red Guards advanced. Jaxon and Lyra opened fire immediately. Captain Rorik engaged one guard in hand-to-hand combat. Alari martial arts a blur of precise strikes and blocks. Jaxon focused on the second guard, trading shots around the control consoles. Elyra, unarmed but resolute, strode directly towards Malrix. Stop the purge, Uncle, she commanded. Malrix laughed, a harsh, grating sound. He tapped commands into the console. Too late. Niece. The core wipe is irreversible. The overload sequence is locked. He drew a small, ornate energy pistol. And your misplaced idealism ends here. He aimed the pistol at Elyra. Lyra, momentarily pinned down by her opponent, screamed a warning. Jaxon, seeing the threat, reacted instinctively. He shoved a console aside, creating a line of sight, and fired his pulse pistol. The shot hit Malrix's weapon hand, sending the energy pistol clattering across the floor. Malrix snarled in pain and rage, clutching his injured hand. At the same moment, Rorik finally subdued his opponent, sending the Red Guard crashing unconscious into a bank of monitors. Lyra dispatched the remaining guard with 2 precise shots. Silence fell, broken only by the hum of the consoles and the urgent beeping of the overload timer from the stasis bay displays. Malrix glared at Elyra, his face contorted with hatred. You cannot stop it. Elyra ignored him, rushing to the main console. Her fingers flew across the holographic interface, accessing override protocols, inputting command strings Jaxon didn't recognize. The core data might be purging, but the encryption keys, he wouldn't destroy those until the last second. She worked frantically, her brow furrowed in concentration. Suddenly, Malrix lunged, grabbing a heavy data slate from a console and swinging it wildly at Elyra's head. Jaxon moved to intercept, but Lyra was faster, stepping between them. taking the blow on her shoulder with a grunt of pain. She kicked Malrix hard in the chest, sending him staggering back against the console. "Found it!" Elyra exclaimed. She slammed her hand down on the interface. A section of the console slid open, revealing a crystalline data matrix, pulsating with faint light, the master key for all encrypted memory logs. He couldn't purge this remotely. She secured the matrix just as the main display confirmed. Memory core wipe complete. She turned to another display, fingers flying again. "Corvin. Thorn. Report. Stasis bay status. Hostiles neutralized." Corvin's voice came over the comm dot, strained but clear. "Reactor overload sequence disengaged. We have control of the stasis bay." Relief washed over Elyra's face, quickly replaced by grim determination as she looked at her uncle, now held at gunpoint by Jaxon and Rorik. "It's over, Malrix," Elyra said, her voice steady. "Your atrocities are exposed. You will answer for what you've done." Malrix laughed again, a broken, defiant sound. "You think this changes anything? Others believed in my vision. The need for strength, for control. It won't die with me." "Perhaps not," Elyra conceded. "But the future of the Alari will not be built on stolen memories and fear. It will be built on understanding, respect, and justice." She nodded to Rorik. "Take him into custody." As Rorik secured the former regent, Jaxon looked at Elyra. He saw the exhaustion, the lingering horror, but also a profound strength, a leader stepping fully into her power. Their gazes met, the unspoken understanding passing between them. They had faced the darkness and won. The memory farms were shut down. The captives would be freed. The truth was out. The hardest part was over, but the task of rebuilding, healing, and forging a new path had just begun. The aftermath of the Xylos Prime assault sent shockwaves through both Alari and human space. The irrefutable evidence contained in the master memory key, combined with Elyra's testimony and the corroborating accounts from liberated human captives and defecting Alari personnel, shattered Regent Malrix's support base. His swift trial and conviction for crimes against sentience marked a turning point for the Alari people. Elyra, hailed as a liberator and reformer, found herself thrust into a position of immense responsibility. With Malrix imprisoned and his network dismantled, the Alari government underwent a radical restructuring. Guided by Elyra and supported by the now emboldened reformist factions, a provisional council was established, tasked with navigating the political fallout, providing reparations and aid to the victims of the memory farms, and redefining Alari interaction with other species, particularly humans. The liberation of the captives was a complex, emotionally charged process. Thousands of humans, held in stasis for years, their minds plundered, were carefully revived and repatriated. The psychological scars ran deep. Earth governments, while relieved and grateful, faced the immense challenge of reintegrating these individuals, many of whom bore witness to horrors that defied easy comprehension. Elyra worked tirelessly, coordinating relief efforts, offering formal apologies on behalf of her people, and establishing joint human Alari programs focused on healing and trauma recovery. She insisted on transparency, ensuring the full extent of Malrix's crimes was known, believing that only through acknowledging the darkness could true reconciliation begin. Jaxon remained by her side throughout this tumultuous period, initially as head of her transitional security detail, but his role quickly evolved. He became a trusted advisor, a confidant, a bridge between Alari and human perspectives. His understanding of trauma, hard choices, and the complexities of interspecies relations proved invaluable. The bond forged through the accidental memory transfer and tempered in the fires of rebellion deepened into a quiet, powerful connection built on mutual respect, shared experience, and a growing affection that transcended species boundaries. The strict Alari protocols against touch began to be re-examined in light of Elyra's experience and the horrors of the memory farms. While the dangers of uncontrolled absorption were undeniable, the potential for consensual, empathetic connection, for healing and understanding, could no longer be dismissed. Elyra advocated for a new philosophy, not the abolition of boundaries, but the introduction of ethics and consent into the unique Alari ability. Memory sharing, she proposed, could be a tool for diplomacy, therapy, and profound intercultural understanding. If approached with reverence and strict ethical guidelines, it was a controversial idea, met with resistance from traditionalists, but supported by many younger Alari and those horrified by Malrix's perversion of their nature. One quiet evening, months after the Xylos Prime incident, Jaxon and Elyra stood on the balcony of her new offices on the Alari home world, overlooking a city shimmering with soft bioluminescent light. The air was calm, filled with the gentle, melodic hum of Alari life. The chaos of the preceding months had begun to settle into a fragile peace. The Council formally ratified the ethical memory exchange protocols today, Elyra said softly, turning to face him. The weight of leadership had etched new lines of seriousness onto her features, but her eyes held a warmth Jaxon hadn't seen when they first met. A major step. Jaxon acknowledged. You faced down a lot of opposition. Change is never easy, she replied, especially when it involves confronting centuries of tradition and fear. She paused, looking out at the city lights. None of this would have happened without you, Jaxon. Your courage, the experiences you inadvertently shared with me, they opened my eyes. They showed me the necessity of fighting for something better, even at great cost. We fought together, Elyra, he said simply. She met his gaze, her dark eyes searching his. The professional distance they had once carefully maintained felt unnecessary now. Artificial. My advisors believe it is time for me to formally establish my permanent leadership council. Solidify the new government. Jaxon nodded. It makes sense. Stability is needed. They also advise, she continued, a faint hint of color rising on her cheeks, that for interspecies relations, particularly with Earth, it would be beneficial to have a permanent human liaison, someone trusted, someone who understands both cultures. She took a small step closer, breaching the old invisible boundary. Someone like you. Jaxon looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the princess who had become a leader, the alien who had learned empathy from a human soldier, the woman who had faced down unimaginable darkness and chosen light. He thought of his own past, the wandering, the fighting, the lack of anchor. Here, beside her, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known before. Not just as a soldier, but as a builder, a partner. Is that a job offer, Your Highness? He asked, a slight smile touching his lips. It's an invitation. Jaxon, she corrected gently, to stay, to help us build this future, to stand with me. Her hand, hesitantly at first, reached out, not towards his arm in a medical emergency, but towards his hand, palm open, an offering, an exchange based not on accident or necessity, but on choice, on trust. He took her hand. The contact didn't trigger an overwhelming flood of memories like before. Instead, there was just warmth, connection, a quiet understanding that flowed between them. Deeper than words, it felt right, grounded. One accept, Jaxon said, his voice quiet but firm. I'll stay. A genuine smile transformed Elyra's face, radiating relief and a profound, quiet joy. In the soft glow of the alien city, the human soldier and the Alari leader stood together, hand in hand. The scars of the past remained. The challenges ahead were immense, but they faced them together. Their bond, forged in the crucible of memory and rebellion, had become a beacon of hope, not just for themselves, but for the future of two species learning to bridge the vastness of space and experience through the simple, powerful act of understanding. The quiet peace after the storm had finally arrived, and with it, the promise of a new beginning, built on shared humanity, freely given, freely received.